Hello everyone! In this video we're going to take a look at Kotlin syntax sugar for delegation. If you haven't seen part 1 where we implemented a simple Java project that leveraged delegation and composition over inheritance, please do so because this video will for the most part be a translation of the Java project into Kotlin, explaining some of Kotlin's features along the way. Additionally, part 1 also explains why we need composition and delegation in order to work around the multiple inheritance limitations of Java, and Kotlin also has such limitations, so the theoretical foundations of part 1 are very much relevant to this video as well. Okay, so as I said, we're mostly going to be translating this Java project from part 1 into Kotlin, and I'm going to begin with the entity types first. So I'm going to create a new package and call it campus entities, just like in the Java project case, and I'll create a base student class. Let's see what we had here. We had an abstract class. For now we're going to skip the interfaces, we're going to implement them later. And our base student is going to have an ID that's an integer as part of its constructor. This should be an abstract class, just like in the Java case. And we're going to have a single abstract method that's gonna be the student type. But in Kotlin's case, we can just keep this as a property and we don't need it to be a method. So we're just gonna have a property called student type, and the subclasses of the base student will implement this property. And we will have a single function that enrolls a student in a course. And it's just gonna print something to the console, in this case student, and the student ID using string interpolation instead of string concatenation in the case of Java, and we will get the student type here. Okay, so this is our base student. And now we can implement the subclasses of this base student, starting with the graduate student. It will extend the base student, and it will also take an ID as part of its constructor. And propagate it to the parent class, and we need to implement the student type field that we defined in the base student. And the ID automatically generated the property implementation. In this case, we just need to implement this get method here, and this is going to be a graduate student. Alright, we can do the exact same thing for the undergraduate student. It's going to extend the base student, it's going to take in an ID and propagate it to its parent class, and we're going to implement the student type. In this case it's undergraduate student. So in Kotlin's case, this get method linked to the property above corresponds to the getStudentType method that we had in the Java case. And finally, let's implement our lecturer. Lecturers also have an ID. And they have an upload lecture content method. For a specific course, and they require a lecture. For that, we'll have to create a new class. And let's implement the method responsible for uploading content. And now we can mirror the first part of our Java example in the previous course. I'm gonna get rid of all of this. And we need an entity ID value. It's going to start at 1. We're going to create an undergraduate student and a graduate student. And we can make sure that they can enroll in courses. Let's run this to make sure that it works. Okay, looks good. The undergraduate student with an ID of 1 enrolled in course 1 and the graduate student enrolled in course 2. And let's make sure that the lecturer also can upload lecture content. And that's the case, the third entity ID, the lecturer, can upload content to course 3 with a title of title. And now we can mirror the multiple inheritance workaround that we did in Java using delegation. So for that purpose, I'll create the supporting entity types interfaces. Starting with the campus entity, and we'll implement it in such a way that it has a single abstract ID property. Next, let's move on to the learner interface. It's going to extend the campus entity interface, and it's going to have an additional method that has the same signature as this enroll in course method here. And finally, we need to create the staff interface. Again, it's going to extend the campus entity, and it's going to have a method for uploading lecture content. I'm just going to copy it from here. Okay, so now we can begin implementing these interfaces inside our class hierarchy. So the base student needs to implement the learner interface. And in this case, the learner extends the campus entity, which has an abstract property called ID of type int. So we just need to make sure that we override this ID here. And this is going to map onto the campus entity's ID. And also this enroll in course method comes from the learner interface, so it also needs to be overridden. As you can see, Kotlin actually complains if you don't explicitly mention that you're overriding a method that exists in the parent class or in the interface that you're implementing, whereas Java would simply ignore this, irrespective of whether you have an override annotation or not. Okay, so moving on to the lecturer entity, we need to extend the staff interface and do the exact same thing. We need to override the ID property coming from the campus entity interface, and we need to override the uploading function. And at this point, we're ready to implement our tutor. Just like in the Java case, our tutor is going to accept two instances as part of its constructor, a staff instance and a learner instance. But instead of implementing all of these three methods here and manually delegating the implementations to their instance fields, like so, we can implement the learner and staff interfaces like we've done in the Java case. And then we can manually implement all three methods and delegate like so. So enroll in course, we can use the learner field here to enroll in the course and provide the course ID. And we can do the same for the uploading of lecture content. In this case, we need to use the staff field, provide the course ID and the lecture. And here we can provide the learner's ID. But as you can see, this is a bit cumbersome because if we had more methods inside these interfaces, we'd have to manually implement a bunch of methods that we want to delegate to. So for this reason, Kotlin has some helpful syntax sugar. I'm going to get rid of this upload lecture content method, and immediately the compiler complains that we haven't implemented that particular method. But I'll add the by keyword here and the name of the class field that we want to delegate the functionality to, in this case staff. And as you can see, the compiler no longer complains because under the hood, this statement here did this. It injected a method that implements the staff interface and delegates its functionality to the staff field here. In addition to this, we can get rid of the enroll in course method, and I'll also get rid of the property to show you something. And we'll do the same for the learner, by learner. So right now, the learner interface, this enroll in course functionality, was also injected here and delegated to the learner field. But we still get an error here because both the staff and the learner interface extend the campus entity, which has a property called ID with a type int. And the compiler doesn't know how to resolve this collision. So in this case, we need to do the resolution manually. So I'm going to provide it here. I'm going to overwrite the ID field and delegate to the learner ID, just like we did in the Java case. And now we can test that this works. I'm going to mimic the functionality from our first Java project. I'm going to comment this out and move on to replicating the functionality we see on the right. So we're going to create an undergraduate tutor. That's going to have an undergraduate learner student as part of its learner implementation, and a lecturer as part of its staff implementation. And we're also going to create a graduate tutor. This is going to be a graduate tutor. And we can make sure that these work. So undergrad tutor, enroll in course 1, and also upload lecture content to course 2 with a lecture of title 1 and some content which we don't care about. And the graduate tutor logic, we're going to enroll in course 2 and upload content to course 3 with title 2 and content 2, but we don't do anything with the content. I'm going to run this to make sure that it works. As you can see, student 1, that's an undergraduate student, enrolled in course 1. I'm gonna move this to the right so we can see better. Enrolled in course 1 and also uploaded content to course 2 with title 1. And student 2 enrolled in course 2, the second student is a graduate student, and uploaded content to course 3 with title 2. And this concludes the Java to Kotlin translation. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you in the next video.